Their Society Shop and Studio in conversation with 70s House Manchester.
I am Estelle Wilson and I'm of 70s House Manchester, and it is primarily an Instagram account which has led on to other things. So that's what I'm best known for, which I guess we will talk about that as we go along.
Yes, amazing. So what inspired 70s House Manchester and how did it begin?
Totally by accident, Fern. I've always loved 70s design, it's for 60s and 70s design, and I started collecting in the early 90s when I was a teen. My dad was an antique dealer and cabinet maker, so he would always go to auctions. I think I went to my first auction when I was 4. I was always have to sit on my hands, so I didn't bid anything. He was like, don't bid anything, don't look, don't knock, don't bid. So I always grew up around antiques. Sort of my dad was very into Georgian, Edwardian and Victorian furniture. So yeah, every sort of holiday was like, oh, let's go to junk shops, let's go to antique shops, let's go into like car boot sales. So I ended up with the pocket money I had, is like kind of buying bits and bobs, which at the time was like clothing. I was really inspired. My parents lived in the 60s in London, and my mum worked in South Kensington, and she used to work around the corner from Bieber. So she used to go into
My
Bieber.
My favourite brand. Yes.
And actually the forward's done by Barbara Honicky of Bieber. So
oh my gosh, separate. We'll have to come back to that in a minute. Yeah.
She is a massive fan of mine, and I'm a massive fan of hers. That was kind of like a bit of a pinch me moment. But so my mum used to work around the corner from Bieber, and she used to buy Bieber clothes. So and they would tell you about their heady sort of lifestyle in the 60s and 70s in London, and they still had. If you think about it, like the 70s, by the time the 80s, it was only like 10 years. So I was born in the 70s and I grew up through the 80s and 90s. So unlike today, where you've got a lot of Instagrammers that are kind of like churning through fast interiors, a lot of people kept furniture. So my grandparents had a lot of stuff from the 50s, 60s and 70s, even the 80s and 90s. You know, it was very much the fashion to buy quality, buy it once and then don't buy it again. So, you know, even though it was the 80s and 90s, I still grew up with a lot of 70s aesthetic. You know, the kitsch Lynch, which actually off pictures, the genie bottles, Starburst clocks, tea furniture. So that was still very much part of my youth growing up. So that kind of all entwined, you know, I started buying bits because it was familiar and, you know, like I say, the kitsch. And even though my house isn't kitsch, and I would love a room full of kitsch, that was kind of where I first started. Clothing, accessories, buying weird plastic stuff, you know, like plastic peacocks and stuff, just because you could. And it was cheap, because, like I said, the decade had ended 10, 15 years before. So it was readily available. There was mountains of it, and it was easy to buy for pence. And it was fun. I mean, I think one of the first interior pieces I bought, I remember I was about 13 or 14, was a huge Muka sort of like mirrored, you know, like the lithograph mirrors in purple. I think it was like a Job cigarette one, and I hung it rather precariously on like a nail in my bedroom, and and the whole it was about 4 foot tall. It was huge. I think I paid like £4 for it. It was like ridiculous, and it fell off the wall.
No.
It just like smashed everywhere.
Oh no.
That was how I was heavily in my Art Nouveau sort of like 60s, 70s Bieber phase. So my bedroom at home was kind of like had ostrich feathers everywhere and curtains.
That sounds like mine.
I kind of wanted that aesthetic. So that's kind of where it started. It was almost clothing through my teenage years. And by the time I got to university, you know, we were going into, there was no such thing as vintage shops like this. This would have been like my dream, to go in and have like curated clothing. You literally went into like second-hand shops. There was a couple of shops that you would class now as vintage, but at the time it was just second-hand clothing. And charity shops, and I said it was just it was the 90s, it was readily available. And we would buy like Denby plates for our student digs, find G-Plan on the side of the road, and
G-Plan on the side of roads.
Yes, the halcyon days of like halcyon days of being a tap wanker, where you could literally go out and people would be leaving like G-Plan nests of tables. The ridiculous thing, I actually think back and I think I was such you know, it wasn't. But there was some of the things I did wasn't the greatest ideas at the time. Like quadrille tables that would be worth like £300 now. I kind of used as garden furniture back in the 90s. And in furniture they got so badly water damaged that we just burnt them on fire. God, it's like a really big thing to sort of admit, isn't it?
Yeah.
But now would be worth hundreds.
Yes.
I really regret that. So yeah, it was just of the time. It was just, you know, there was a big resurgence with Britpop for in the mid-90s for like sort of 60s fashion, and you know, with the sort of like there was Oasis, Blur, and it was like very much that mod revival, which kind of led on to, you know, things like Austin Powers, which had very much that sort of swinging 60s pastiche, which kind of like influenced us as students. So, you know, I up until that point in life, I always felt I was a bit of a misfit and an outcast. And, you know, people who have known me since I was younger, my school years and later years, go, you've always been into this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I've always been into it. And they were like, we thought you were just weird. You know, hey. So, you know, when I got to university, I found people, like-minded people, and it was kind of like the misfits. You know, there was punks, there was skinheads, mods, you know, and it was very much a melting pot. And we all went to soul nights. We went to, so you know, it was everything: clothes, furniture, accessories, readily available. Student digs, you can do what you want with it, basically. So we had like beaded curtains, hooker pipes. Wow. Massive Bieber. I had a beautiful Bieber light, fringe light in my bedroom, but was just left in the house that we moved into, and I just took it with me.
Wow.
So yeah, it was just readily available. It's there, and then when you've got the melting pot of friends and the music, you know, and it was like there was just a whole revival. So that's kind of like where I started. Amazing. And then over the years, it's just grown and grown from there. And obviously, as I got older, and being supposedly more sensible, which is not actually more sensible, you end up buying more furniture.
Yes.
And because I've come from sort of a long lineage of people that have bought second hand, it never occurred to me that I should buy something new.
No,
It's like, if I can buy stylish, beautiful, well-made furniture second hand. So I think I was very lucky that I grew up with that kind of ethos that, you know, whether it's an antique table over 100 years old or 200 years old or something that's 60 years old, if it is well made and you can buy it at a reasonable price, why would you go and buy a copy of it for twice the money? Doesn't make any fiscal sense to me. And stuff back then, the build quality is so much better than today. So that's kind of where it started. And then, you know, like I say, I moved to Manchester and then started painting things orange, and then.
And then did you just put it on Instagram one day and just... Yeah,
basically, that's what happened. It was never premeditated. Friends of mine were like, your house is lovely. And I was like, and I hadn't done a lot of the things that people can see now at the time. It was kind of like more the living room, dining room, hall, I think. And they were like, oh, you should put it on there because people would like to see it. And I was like, oh, don't be daft, you know. And I was like, okay, I'll put it on.
Wow.
If I had my time again, I perhaps would have thought of a better name.
No,
because it was like, I was like, well, it does exactly what it says. It said it's a 70s house and it's in
Manchester. Well, there you go.
I wasn't overthinking it at the time. It is what it is. And so yeah, it was just, I started posting pictures and people seemed to like it. It was
amazing.
It was quite a weird. It was a weird time. It was like I was putting stuff up and people were reacting to it in a really positive way, and it had never occurred to me that anyone other than myself and perhaps a couple of my friends would really enjoy it. And then it was kind of always a documentary for my projects, just like, you know, doing the bathroom. I think the bathroom was one of the first things that people started to take notice when I did the disco bathroom. Which, for those of you that don't know, it's kind of like all mirror tiles and a brown umbrella suite. You have to check it out.
It's iconic. It's the bathroom of dreams.
And, again, I found the suite for £20 on eBay. So, you know, it was complete with taps, shower, you know, everything was there.
Wow.
So when I did that, I think a lot of people were like, oh my God, what's she up to?
Yeah.
It's like ripping out a white bathroom and putting this in. And then I had so many
It
people
works
like.
so well.
I think it works really well.
I love it.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's one of my favourite rooms. And then a lot of people were like, assumed the brown bathroom was the before. And they were like, oh yeah, the white bathroom's so much better.
Shame
It's
on
like,
you.
No, lovies. No, you've got it the wrong way round.
Yes.
No, ducky. No, it's
Wow.
the other way around. So that was kind of like, and that was during, I finished that, just kind of like, I decided to rip out the bathroom and the country locked down. So that was fun. So that was kind of around that time, and I guess everyone was stuck at home and on Instagram. So that's kind of where it took off.
Agree.
And then, yeah, it sort of goes from there, really.
Amazing. And then how did the book come about, which is something that we are talking about today? And this is the lovely book. It's available now.
I'm not entirely sure. What I will say is you never know who's watching.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
So I don't know when my editor followed me.
Wow.
I don't know how long she'd been following me for. I must ask her actually. I must text her and ask her, how long were you following me for?
Yeah.
So I had no idea that people like that were following.
Yeah.
They just become names.
Yeah.
You don't
know who's following.
them.
Yeah.
So be nice to everyone, folks, because you don't know. So I'd been asked to appear on BBC The Bidding Room.
Wow.
And that was a bit of a mind twitch. It was kind of like, they were like, we'd love you to be our 70s expert. And I was like, okay. So I did like the casting for that, got on the show, filmed series 2 it was after lockdown, so it was the October of that year. And so things have been churning along. And I remember thinking, the story of how I got the books is quite funny actually, because somebody contacted me through my shop going, we would love you to contribute to a book. And I remember saying to my half Steve, he was like, have you read that email? And I was like, yeah, I have, I'm not replying. And I was like, he was like, why aren't you replying? Because I'd got a mood on about it. And I was like, I'm not contributing to another book. I'm not giving away my knowledge for somebody else's thing. And I was like, why should I work for somebody else to get all the glory? I'm sick of it, I want my own book.
Yeah.
And I said, if I'm only doing it if I want my own book. And it was a really flippant throwaway thing. And he kind of stood over me and made me reply going, please tell me more information. And she would say, can I call you? And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. And I was really, really nonchalant about it. I was like, yeah, whatever. Call me tomorrow. Here's my number, 2:00. So she called me and she was like, hi, I've been following you. I'm a commissioning editor for Kyle Books. We would like you to pitch a book. And I was like, what? And she was like, yeah, we want. I said, what, a book for me? My book? And she was like, yeah. I said, not somebody else's book you want me to be in. She went, no, you want you to write a book. And I was like, okay.
That's amazing.
So it was like a really odd
Yeah.
I was like, oh. So again, always answer your emails.
Never know what opportunities are in that inbox.
Yeah, exactly. Don't dismiss something just because you're being salty.
Yeah.
It was like, she was like, you need to do a pitch in the next 10 days for me. And I've never done a book pitch.
No.
Did A-level English.
Yeah.
I learned about Julius Caesar. I've never done
Yeah.
a book pitch. I mean, I could recite Hamlet.
Yeah.
They were like, so I was like, and it was one of those classic sort of ADHD moments where I just went, oh, I can't do this.
Wow.
And then, like the day before, just pulled it out my arse in the last like 4 hours because I had a deadline, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. That will have to do.
Yeah.
Sent it off, and I had to wait like 2 or 3 weeks to hear anything. And I kind of put it out of my mind, going, I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to get a book pitch. You know, had to pitch it. There's hundreds of other books that are going to be pitched, and then I heard, I think probably about 2.5 weeks later, they'd had the meeting, and they wanted to do the book.
That's amazing.
And initially it was going to be a gift book, but they loved my pitch so much they made it into a table book, which was mind blowing. So that was in sort of September, October 2021, and I obviously couldn't tell anybody about it up until 6 months before launch. So November 22. So I sat on it for well over a year.
That must have been so hard to keep it a secret.
It was really, really hard. It was painful. And they were like, yeah, we need you to write it by May 2022. And I was like, okay, so the contract was all done just before Christmas 21. And I was like, well, I'll start writing in January. And then I was like, yeah, you've got 20 weeks to write the book. And I was like, it was like 45,000 words. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
Not really realising what I'd agreed to.
Yeah, it's a big task.
45,000 words, when you say it,
Yeah.
doesn't really sound
Doesn't
a
feel
lot.
too bad.
It doesn't feel a lot. And then I remember writing for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then I'd written 10,000 words, and I was like, oh, shit.
Another 5,000 to go.
Yeah. So,
wow, okay.
and I just remember sitting there after Christmas knowing I had to write it, and every day that went past, I got more and more stressed out because I'm like, I'm losing a day, but I don't know where to start.
Yeah.
And my very good friend Nat just said, pick a topic,
Just
write about it.
Yeah.
So I think I started on rugs. Because I know
Amazing.
I know a lot about rugs.
Amazing.
So I sat down and started typing about. Well, it turns out I wrote way too many words about rugs. And I had to edit it down an awful lot.
45,000 words
Yeah,
just
it
on
really
rugs.
was sort of like 6,500 words about rugs. And I was like, you do need to write something else.
I
in
think
the
there
book.
should be an extended edition.
Yeah, I think so.
Please.
They did have to take quite. I think in the end, when I finished it, I think I'd done 55,000, so I'd done like 10,000 over, and they were like,
Amazing.
"We've had to edit this heavily." And I'm like, "I'm sorry." I just
You got on a roll.
I got
There
on
you
a
go.
roll.
Once you're on a roll, you.
It was the rugs. So I wrote about rugs, and then we'd done a plan together of what we wanted, and she was like, "What do you want to write about?" And I was like, "I want to write about this." And I still have the piece of paper where we mapped it out together. You've got 2 pages on this, 3 pages on that, 4 pages on this. So you've got. So I had an idea of how many thousand words I had to write about each subject. So yeah, you've got 2,000 words on that. And I was like, "Can I take 1,000 words off that and put it on that?" And she was like, "Yeah."
Wow.
So the book was kind of planned out
Yeah.
between us. So they know how many pages are going to be in the book.
Sure.
So we worked it out. So yeah, that helped me, because then I would just, so every day I'd go, right, I've written about that. What's next? Oh yeah, Space Age, and then I'd write about that.
Amazing. So you've
And
got
then
kind of a
stop that.
structure to work
Oh, well,
from. That's
oh,
a little
right.
bit
Yeah.
easier than just having
Yeah.
started from. Or do you find it harder because you're constrained to like certain?
I'm good with boundaries.
Yeah.
I'm good with routine. And it was kind of like forced me to write about the bits, and
Wow.
it was kind of like, so it wasn't written in order. None of it was all written higgledy-piggledy.
Nice.
The first thing I wrote about was rugs. The last thing I did, which was after I'd submitted the manuscript, was my thank you, which
Amazing.
was actually the hardest thing to write. Because I was worried about leaving people out, and I cried 7 times while writing it. It was very emotional. But the things I thought would be easiest, that I thought writing about me and my experiences, actually turned out to be the hardest.
Wow. Okay,
Because they
interesting.
are
More.
based on my experiences of my life, and they become emotional, and you
Yeah.
remember times, and you remember people that are no longer here,
Yeah,
like
sure.
grandparents, people who inspired you.
Yeah.
And that was hard in a very emotional
Yeah.
way, whereas writing about tables isn't actually that
Yeah.
emotional. It's pure.
Well, yeah, you
it's-
never know.
It's purely factual.
Yeah,
So you can literally just go down, look at the facts, get dates, get manufacturers.
Sure.
There's no emotion. So I thought that would be hard, like researching all the facts and figures and cross-reference. And there's a lot of that. And a couple of people have asked me, "Did you have a researcher?" And I was like, "No, it was me. I did
That's
everything.
amazing.
I did it all. I researched it." So, and even though I know facts,
Yes.
it's one of those things that I need to make sure that facts
Is
right.
actually correct, yeah.
So you can't just go on the internet and go take verbatim, because
you never know.
so you have to fact check in 5 or 6 places, reference the facts before you're like, yeah, that's right. Because at the end of the day, other people who've got knowledge on these subjects can read it and go, well, that's
not
rubbish.
real. Yeah, that's not true.
So I had to make sure, and I wanted to make sure that it was authentic
Amazing.
and as correct and as factual as possible when I was writing it.
That's so cool. And where's it available at the moment?
It is available on all good booksellers.
Amazing.
I wanted to say that for such a It is available online.
Nice.
So it's online and in all good bookstores and in libraries, apparently, someone told me today. But
Amazing.
if you could buy it rather than later, that would help me. That very gratefully. So yeah, I think at the moment it's on special offer on Amazon, which, if you don't mind shopping from Jeff, it's £15 at the moment.
Amazing.
It's got a special offer on.
Wicked.
But yeah, that's
So
that's
cool. Honestly, it's such a beautiful book. It's 100% worth buying, and it will look so good on a coffee table. It is the perfect, the colours, everything. I want my Hornsey mug next to it. It's amazing. Congratulations.
You've been watching Star Society Shop and Studio in conversation with 70s House Manchester.